Hey guys, Jenny here with a chatty speed paint video. I'm working on a duotone skull painting, and I'm doing this because I thought it would be really cool. But also, I've been painting a lot of skulls lately because of my new Skillshare class. So in this class, I walk you through painting a skull. We do a value study, aka black and white painting, and then we do a color version, and I walk you through the drawing and the anatomy. And so yeah, I'm gonna have it all linked down below if that sounds cool. If you're watching this and you're like, wow, I would like to watch a more detailed, tighter version of that video, go check it out on Skillshare. Okay, so let's talk about what I'm working on right now. That's the duotone skull painting. So I'm working with core watercolors on 140-pound Arches cold press paper using my silver black velvet brushes. And right here I'm trying to figure out exactly what colors I'm going to use. So I knew for sure I wanted to use quinacridone red light because it's like the best. It's just kind of a nice, juicy, hot pink color that's really fun to use. So the question was, which kind of turquoise do I want to use? So I have cobalt teal, cobalt turquoise, and phthalo turquoise. I was really thinking about it because I love the granulation that I can get in the cobalt turquoises and teals, but those can be kind of hard to they're kind of opaque, so they're hard to get those really deep values. And sometimes when you're doing something that's simple like this, where you're only using two colors, it can be too much granulation. I like to relegate granulation to like really small, specific areas of texture and not half a painting. So I went with the phthalo turquoise. What I'm doing right here is a really soupy, loosey-goosey, wet-on-wet first layer. So I put down a whole bunch of pink. In this painting, the white has been replaced by pink, which I thought was kind of a fun thing to try to do. So basically the whole painting is pink, and I'm going in there and trying to force some back runs and some cauliflowering, whatever you want to call it, the watercolory goodness, trying to make that happen, putting a little bit of the turquoise in there where it's going to be darkest. And what I'm doing is my lightest values will have all of the looseness to it, all of that watercolory goodness. It's in the lightest values, and then I can be really tight and really detail-oriented in my darker values, where it would stand out if there was something that maybe was unpredictable in a way that didn't work for the painting. So right here, you're going to see a big jump right here. The painting was wet. Now it's dry. You can see how much it shifts. And I just want to note how important it is to let your art dry. So I teach classes in real life, and it's something that comes up over and over again. You know, people sit down to paint. They want to paint. They don't want to wait around for paint to dry. But it's just the reality of a watercolor painting. Sometimes there are just periods of time you've got to wait for things to dry. It took about 30 minutes for my painting to get completely dry so I could get nice crisp lines on top of it. Because what really works about approaching your painting with a really loose wet on wet first layer is you have all of, you know, those really soft edges, and you have all of these like organic textures going on, but we're going to contrast those with really tight edges with all of these shapes. And to get really nice clean shapes, you need a completely dry surface. So there is an element of patience and stop and go when you are first starting a watercolor painting. Now that tends to resolve itself. You don't have to do as much waiting when you're doing more detailed work, because while one section of your painting is drying, you can move on to a second section. So I think that it's really important, if you are just now, you know, getting into the whole watercolor thing, the idea of you do some work in an area and then just let it be. Move on to another area of your painting. The more you kind of paint, you're kind of going to be wearing out your painting, and you're going to make it look overworked and muddy. So if you're ever at a point where you're like, not sure what to do, just let it dry. See what happens. See how it looks, and then go from there. I also like that built-in mental break too. You kind of draw your attention somewhere else on your painting, and then you go back to a certain feature, and you're like, oh, okay, now I know what to do. I've had that little mental break. So I think it's a good workflow. So working in here, adding more details, that I really am a fan of the way that the eye socket and the nose cavity ended up working out. And I really think that I chose to do that, kind of really push the warmth, the brightness of the pink in those areas, because this is actually the third skull I've painted of late. The other two are in my Skillshare class, and by the time you've worked with a subject matter several times, first of all, I came into this painting really relaxed and excited to work on it, because I feel like I had, I've kind of learned from painting it twice before, and now it's like, yeah, I know how I'm going to approach this, and I know, that I want a warm, saturated kind of push in the kind of sockets of the skull, just because I'd done it once before. So when you're thinking about, your painting journey, everything you paint before your current painting will inform what you're going to do. It helps you make decisions. Every single painting you do, whether it's good or it's bad, is a data point that, helps you kind of, it's like, what color, what value, what saturation do I want to put in this area? Well, I know I did it, one way in a previous painting, and that result was, either good or bad. So that's going to help me decide how to paint now. So it's, it's definitely, it's a process, a journey, all builds on itself. I was really excited to work on this painting because of the, I guess, kind of challenge or the puzzle of working with colors in this way. So there isn't any white on this painting, and we all know with watercolor, white is really crucial because we're not using white paint, we're using the white of our paper. But on this one, the white has been replaced by hot pink. And so that kind of creates an interesting challenge. And there's also the fact that when you are mixing colors on a computer, it's different from mixing colors with pigments. And so approaching this where it's like I'm replicating a Photoshop effect with paint, it was kind of interesting. I wanted the pink and the turquoise to exist as separate colors, but also there is some mixing in there. So it's kind of that balance. You don't want it to just be like I'm mixing a value study where I've replaced white with pink, and then it's like pink all the way to dark, neutralized pink, because it's actually the dark end of the spectrum is it's a turquoise, it's a new color. So there's a balance of, when do I mix the colors? When do I layer turquoise on top of pink? And when do I let the turquoise be really strong on its own? And so that was an interesting kind of challenge to working on a painting like this. And I think that working with an object that's primarily white and, is very driven by value, since there isn't a lot of color in the real skull. I think that creates really interesting scenarios to where you can really play with color and you can really push things. The skull is a really great subject matter to paint, just because of the balance of, there's areas where there's a lot of, smooth transitions and kind of shading, and then there's areas where there's really tight details like the teeth. And so it's a playground, I guess. And I think that's why skulls are often incorporated into art. I mean, it's like kind of badass and like sick and all that, but also it's just a really wonderful subject matter to work with. So, I've really come to appreciate it. I think at one point I made some cynical joke where it's like, oh, cool, another, gig poster with some skulls on it, because skulls are on everything. But I totally get it. There's so much cultural baggage with skulls. It kind of gets at these weird emotional things when you're thinking about looking at a skull, but also just the object itself. So really great subject matter. Not just because it's October as I'm filming this and Halloween's coming up, but it's just a good thing. I mean, also like anatomy, just understanding that. So Yeah, skulls. I am a fan. Although, I'll probably lighten up on them because I've been doing it a lot and posting a lot on social media. And it's like, let's do something else. And then I'm like, cat skulls. And it's like, no, work on something different. So right here, I'm putting in the darkest values. I am doing a little bit more wet on wet. And I will say, it's like, well, do I point out the thing that I don't think is great about this painting? And it's like, well, we're all friends here. We can talk. We can real talk. I think that I came close to overworking, or you might say that I did, just with all of the wet, especially in that area that's kind of the center of the painting. It looks like granulation, so it's like, cool, let's just pretend it is. But actually, that's the paper beginning to give out on me, adding texture. So, it's weird. The camera kind of picks up texture a little differently than how it looks in real life. If you want to see a nicer, version of this, go check it out on my Instagram. I feel like the photo is a little bit more accurate than this video. So it's not quite as grainy looking as it does on my screen, but, when you're working, if you're doing a lot of wet on wet stuff like this, and if you're going to be doing a lot of layers and stuff, it might be a worthy investment to do a 300-pound paper or heavier. I like to keep my paintings light and kind of light in color, but also light and upbeat and not overworked. But for this painting, there's some really dark areas. And I think that if this had been on a 300-pound paper, it might just look a hair better. So maybe that's something to think about. And of course, you can get dark values by just not layering and just getting it right with your first wash. That's a thing too, of course. But I think that, again, there's this push and pull that I've been thinking about a lot lately where it's like, a lot of layers and complexity can be very beautiful and interesting, and I think it works for the subject matter. But then I also look at other things I do where I'm very much into the fact that you can see the different shapes of color and it's very light and effortless looking. And when I look at other people's art, I also like that look. So it's something that I'm thinking about a lot lately. I know next week I'm going to sit down and just do a bunch of watercolor portrait studies because there's just some things about layering and getting those darkest values on a 3D shape that I'm wanting to work through a little bit. So yeah, I'm also looking forward to that. It's just great to do things for practice, and I've been so obsessive about I need to make content for social media, but I don't seem to have time, and I don't know, it just ends up being so stressful and all of that. And it's like, no, just let go of the regular posting schedule. It's okay if you don't make content. So the social media feed and algorithm, blah, 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 all that stuff. It's okay if I don't do it in favor of practicing, because at the end of the day, what does it matter how many likes my Instagram post makes if I'm never progressing in technique? And, that's not always social media friendly. So that's just some things I've been thinking about. Things like, what's a reasonable amount of things that I can do? And then there's also this, you put in work to stuff and sometimes there's more tangible outcome for it. So social media posting, videos, and Skillshare classes, all of that is something that's I understand I posted this thing, a painting, a finished painting. I created this thing. But sometimes there's work that we do that don't have any real, tangible or quantifiable results, but it's just still things that need to be done, like practicing. And, there's administrative stuff. There's stuff, personal things you got to do to kind of keep your life going, where it's sometimes I struggle with actually doing those things and keeping up with it because I'm so obsessed with, achievement in a way that feels very, quantifiable. I want to look back over the past month and be I did these projects and really point at them. And sometimes it might be I did 0 projects, but I feel very inspired and I feel very confident and I've improved technically. But all of those things are just feelings, but it's still important to do it. So that's kind of what's been on my minds lately. I've totally, I don't know, used to be like, oh, I mean, it's just a chatty video. It's just a vlog. You're just filming the stuff you would do anyway. What's the big deal? Why is it so hard? And now I'm like, it just is. I can't explain why it's so hard, but it just is. So anyways, that's my personal thoughts on this whole thing. So let me know what you think about this painting. I want to play around with color like this in the future, do some other color combos and stuff. It was really fun. So if you liked it, give this video a thumbs up, follow me on Instagram, and subscribe to this YouTube channel. I will see you in the next